Jesus said, blessed are the meek, those who are under control, those who have a certain amount of humility, who aren't pushy, for they will inherit the earth. To anyone there that day, from that mix of cultures and peoples and groups, that had to have landed as an absolutely absurd statement.
This is the Land in the Bible podcast.
All right. Welcome to this episode of the Land in the Bible podcast. We are in part 2 of the Mount Beatitudes, Sermon on the Mount. Lots of different things happening here. So we kind of did the overview last week. We were just talking about how bad we are. Right?
Well, yeah, we were working our way through the Beatitudes and you know, talking about the first two.
Yeah.
You know, blessed are those who mourn and the poor in spirit, and how, you know, the first thing you have to do to get anywhere with God is realize that, yeah, you have nothing to offer.
Yeah.
And, you know, be mournful of your state and your sin.
Yep.
So you have to recognize that, yeah, you aren't good before you can start getting cleaned up by the Lord.
It's really refreshing because it's like hard to have things to offer. And so to recognize you don't have anything to offer is kind of a relief.
It takes the stress off. Yeah. And again, a lot of this is countercultural because in our culture, you want to work to achieve, to earn, to be, you know, social climbing and business climbing. And, you know, so much of it is like, if you can perform and if you can be excellent, then you deserve, you know, and the great thing with God is you really don't.
Yeah.
You know, I heard a sermon one time years ago, I think it was Timothy Keller, and he was talking about how there were 2 ways someone could live in his house. In one way is they could rent a room from him, in which case there would be an exchange, and you know, you'd pay rent, and then you would have certain rights based on the fact that you'd paid for them. So one way you can live in the house is to pay rent, and that certain kind of relationship. And the other way you could live in his house was just to be his son, and you don't have to pay rent. And the expectations are very different. As a matter of fact, there's very little expectations of you, and you get to make lots of demands and ask for things, you know. And unfortunately, a lot of us think that we're renters, you know, that we're like buying space in God's kingdom, when actually we're invited to be sons, you know, and daughters, which is a way better way to be there. You know, it's less demanding, but you have to give up the idea that you earned it. You know, I deserve to be here. I know you don't. You were born into it.
Yeah.
You know, God invited you into it. You're blessed. That's all.
Yeah.
You know, but our culture and our pride doesn't like that. You know? Yeah. So we kind of push back on it, I think.
That's good.
So we're going to move right along to the third beatitude and then tie it to some things further down in the sermon. I think is kind of how the flow of this one will go. Okay. And the third one is, you know, blessed are the meek, for they'll inherit the earth. You know, I'm actually looking at translation right now. It says blessed are the humble. And the reason for that is that the word that is used there is not easy to translate. There's not a good word to word equivalent for it. You know, Greek to English. It's a word that, you know, meek is a pretty good translation. It implies strength under control. You know, so it's sort of the picture of the big giant burly, you know, workout guy who's like all just like ripped muscle, and he's like holding a baby or something like that. You know, like so it's like strength, power, but it's under control. It's not pushy. It's not shovey. It's not demanding its own way and its own right to get what it wants. So as I like to mention around here on these things, I did live for a long, long time in the Middle East. And in the Middle East, we don't do lines very well. You know, like Americans, British people, certain cultures.
Get in the queue.
Yeah, they do a nice job of lining up for everything. Yeah. You know, you just queue up as they say across the pond, and you know, and then just people just kind of go in order, and it's okay, and it works out. But then there's other cultures that just don't do that very well, and people cut and they push in, and instead of having a line, you know, it's just like a glob of humans near the counter, and whoever kind of is loudest and sort of pushes their way to get in front of the serving person, then they're probably going to get their order taken. And in order, so you go to McDonald's or something like that, and you have to like wrestle with people to ever get your order put in sometimes. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable, and that's kind of a reality, how things go there. I had waited in line one time, this is years ago, for close to an hour to pay my electric bill, all the stupid things. And I'm second from the front, and the guy's taking forever, like chatting with everybody who pays a bill, and I'm losing my mind. And this little old woman, she's probably 5 feet even, maybe, looks like she's about 70 years old, walked absolutely all the way around everybody and stepped right in front of me. and there were days when I was living over there that I would just, stuff like that would roll off me. It was a good day and I'm feeling good. I'm like, how ridiculous, and I let it roll off. But that day I could not. I just, my American and just my pride self stuff took charge, and I was like, oh no, lady, you do not get to walk right in here and step into the second in line spot after I waited an hour for it. And so, I coached basketball for many a year. So
you blocked her out?
Oh, I did total. Like I just put my elbow right over her shoulder and like just rolled around her, like just
you're getting a rebound.
Yeah. Just it's like, oh no, lady, this is not happening. And she looked at me and cussed about me in Arabic to the whole crowd. But
you knew what she said.
Yeah. It wasn't nice. So I was like, I can't take this right now. So that's not meekness, right? Right. Meekness is strength under control, and it's not pushing and fighting to get its own way. You have your strength under control. It doesn't imply humility. It implies you're not ultra self-assertive. And I think of it like this. Now I have 5 kids. Well, let's pause. Let's do the pause before I go down there. Let's, we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, but let's talk a little bit about the cultural mix that was there when Jesus was talking. So Jesus is talking, standing on the top of the hill, looking down the hill as it curves out. The Bible says it was a large crowd. It was at least hundreds, if not thousands of people. He's talking to them. It says he was teaching his disciples. So the target was the people who were really following him. He's trying to tell them how to be a follower of his. And in that crowd, you would have had all sorts of different people. You would have had, just run-of-the-mill, work-a-day, Jewish sort of blue-collar people. You'd have had the religious scribes, Pharisees, priests, or the bad guys in the Bible story often. You would have had some of the bad guys. You'd have had people like tax collectors, Jews that had sold out or were kind of working for the Romans to collect money. You would have had Roman soldiers, because there's no way you have a huge gathering and you don't have military presence there. You would have probably had Roman spies in the crowd. You also had Greek people and Syriac people and Aramaeans, and all these people are around. And Jesus said, blessed are the meek, those who are under control, those who have a certain amount of humility, who aren't pushy. Blessed are those people, for they will inherit the earth. To anyone there that day, from that mix of cultures and peoples and groups, whatever, that had to have landed as an absolutely absurd statement. Because anyone there would have been like, wait, Jesus, time out. Right now, a huge chunk of the earth, all the earth around here, and for several hundred miles around, is controlled by the Romans. They did not get it through meekness.
Right.
Who
has gotten it through meekness, right?
Yeah, we don't think of, the Romans, Julius Caesar coming in. We've talked before about his his triumphs, coming in with all the slaves, with his foot on the neck of a conquered king, chopping his head off in the town square. Yeah. Like, nothing about that is meekness. It's power. It's just power. We're strong enough. We're going to take it. And we're going to conquer you. We're going to take your stuff to make us rich. And we're going to take your kids and your wives as slaves. We're going to kill. I mean, there's nothing gentle about it. So if they had the earth, why is Jesus saying this? Because it doesn't make sense. And it's on its surface jars with reality. I mean, to this day, if we think about, the people who are in political power, people who are in high places in our business world, in our culture, I mean, how many of them do you think got there via meekness? It's not very many. Right. You may have a few people born into something or whatever, maybe, but there may be some exceptions, but in general, no, it's not the reality. And so why is Jesus saying this? Why is he making this statement that is so odd? Now I agree. Obviously, I think everybody would agree that meekness is a good thing. It's good to have a certain sense of humility. It's good to not just sort of be some animal pushing and shoving to get your way. It's good to have your strength and your anger and your emotions under control, and not just be like lashing out and going nuts and pushing and shoving. And like, those are all good things, but how does that get tied back to inheriting the earth? That's a bit of a hard one to wrap your head around. And I think that it goes kind of like this. In pondering meekness, I'll use a family example. So I have 5 kids, and however many kids you have, you just tend to buy things in sets of that many, So if you're buying something, well, you buy 5 of them, because if you buy 3, well, 2 people are going to be unhappy with you, So you just, if you're buying cookies, or if you're buying Cokes, or if you're buying, whatever it is you buy, you just kind of buy 5 of them, and then everybody gets one, and there's no fighting, and people are happy, and things are fine, right? It's kind of how it goes. And so I would sort of throw this scenario out there. What if I, as a father of 5, were to go buy cookies for my kids, like back when they were younger, they're older teenagers now, but like when they were kids, 12 or younger. And the pack comes, it's a sleeve with 8 cookies. So I show up at the house with 5 kids and 8 cookies. So I dump them into a bowl or something, or put them on a plate and say, hey guys, go get a cookie. Well, everybody grabs one. Now there's 3 left. So 3 people are going to get a cookie, and 2 people are not going to get a cookie. Now, I have children, some of which I can assure you would dive across the table, pushing and shoving as they go, to be sure they get one of those 3 cookies. Mm-hmm. They're going to be like, they're just going to inhale their first one, and then try to be first in on the cookie. I have other kids who might fight for the right, and want to argue about why they should be the recipient of the first cookie, or one of those, but mom, like last time you got a dessert, I got less than, and they're going to want to like state their case and make their argument for why they deserve one of the 3 remaining cookies. There's going to be different ways, but at the end of the day, there will be general maneuvering, conflict, whatever, about getting those 3 cookies, because nobody wants to be frozen out and not get a second cookie. But what if one of my kids, and I may have 1 or 2 who on a good day would do this, what if one of my kids said, you know what, I'm good, I don't need a second, you can let the other one have this? That's meekness. It's not pushing and shoving to the front. It's deferring. It's using your power, your authority, your whatever to help others. And that's a good thing, I think. So in that situation, so now one of the kids has piped up and said, I'm good, let him have it. What am I going to do as a parent? How am I going to react to that?
It sounds like a parable.
Yes,
What should I do with
it
the
is
baby?
it is a parable. Where shouldest I go with
You twist the
with
Oreo
the-
and split it in half. And
oh, if you cut the Oreo in half, one was like, no, don't cut the Oreo. So, and the one who won't divide it, it really belongs to them. No, I think what I would do is I would be very sure that the one who had deferred, who was meek, who refused to push and shove and dive across the table and get into an argument and and all the stuff that we do to get ours. I'm going to push, I'm going to shove, I'm going to fight, I'm going to get it, I'm going to go first, I'm going to be mean, I'm going to be rude, I'm going to hurt this person. All the stuff we do to get what we think should be ours and our rights and our prerogatives. The one who deferred and was like, I'm just not going to do that. What I'm going to do as a father is I'm going to be sure they get rewarded. I want to be sure that kid gets 2 or 3 cookies over here on the side, and that I take them out later, and that I make sure that I tell them like, hey, I really appreciate how, I'm going to be sure that their reward is far greater than that they gave up, because I care far more about their character than I care about who gets a cookie. And I think God is the same. So when he says the meek will inherit the earth, what we have to decide is, do we believe him or not? Do we believe that if we act the right way, that God will balance the scales and even reward us? Like to me, it's a faith proposition. And you have all these instances through the Bible where people were faced with those sorts of issues. We talked about Saul and how he was commanded, to go kill the Amalekites, kill them, kill all their cattle, kill their king. God, they were, really bad pagans. And I guess God wanted to end their influence on Israel. So just go kill them all, get rid of all their stuff. We're going to wipe out the memory of Amalek. But then he gets down there, they win the battle. And his men come up to him and say, yeah, but we want the spoils. We know God commanded, but, look at those goats and sheep, cows. Those are worth a lot of money. Why don't we keep some stuff? And when he's confronted later by Samuel, the priest, he says, I know what God said, but I was scared of the people. So his vision, his eyesight is here. It's terrestrial. And he's more concerned with what people think than recognizing God as his source. And then you look at David, on the other hand, who sins mightily with Bathsheba, and you read his repentance, and he's like, Lord, take not your presence from me. Like he has a clear understanding of who his source is. Then my source is God. Yeah, I have a kingdom, but I got it because God gave it to me, and I need to stay connected to God. And I think you can kind of see things like that throughout the Bible. There's another story with a guy named King Asa, who basically gets into a tough spot, and he steals money from the temple to send as a bribe to another king to attack an enemy. And then God says that was a sin, and you're going to have no peace the rest of your reign because you did that, because you sort of went about doing it your way. And all that's just to say that throughout our lives, I think, we're confronted with situations where there is the way a normal human goes about getting what they want. You bribe a guy to attack your enemy. It's a great chess move. You spare some animals to give to your loyal guys. Don't they deserve something for fighting for you? Here's the normal way that humans do things. And by doing that, you can get something you want. And then God's over here saying, yeah, but my commandments are different. And you have to choose. And in choosing, what you're announcing is who your real faith is in. Like if your faith is really in God, and you really think God is the supplier who supplies needs and who takes care of you and who's watching, well, then you'll choose to do it his way, even though that's going to hurt you in your short term. Even though it's going to be like, ugh, I don't know. But you're going to choose to do that because you're like, yeah, but God's up there and God sees, and I trust God with this. So this is why James said faith without work is dead. That you show your faith by what you do, And so if you choose to act humbly, meekly, and not just beat somebody in the head, take what you want, you keep yourself under control, keep yourself godly, then that's an act of faith, right? And the promise is that you will inherit the earth. Now, here's my take on that. I think that in the last generation or two, as a Christian community, we've lost something that maybe COVID is bringing back. I mean, we'll see how it goes. But if you go back and you read the great sermons of the church, if you go back and read people like Jonathan Edwards and people like that, they talked an awful lot about things like heaven and hell and eternal reward and punishment. And when I was a kid, we heard a lot about it in churches. And at some point in the last 10 or 20 years, that really switched. And it really became much more about this earth and this life. And that's not wrong. It's not wrong to be concerned with your life and how it's going. It's not wrong to be concerned with your kids and your job and those things. You should be concerned with these things. But I think as Christians, we should have a very, very active, real understanding of the fact that we really don't belong here. You know, if you read the Narnia books, they're laced with this idea that, like, the king, Aslan the lion, who of course represents Jesus, that he was here and he went away and he needs to come back and fix things. You know, like that's sort of always, there's in several of the books, there's this tension of like, well, we think he's coming. We've heard rumors of him, but we're not sure. And you know, and you need him to show up to sort of save the day is sort of the thing. And he goes away for seemingly hundreds of years sometimes, and he comes back again. And there's this whole tension of, you know, will you continue to believe and live as if this is going to happen or not? But there's a real sense of the future and of eternity and of a reality, you know, beyond this reality. And at some point, I think we really got focused on here. And I'm not advocating for like some sort of old school, like, you know, hellfire and brimstone on a daily basis sort of thing and like scream at people and run them off. I'm not advocating for that. But I think the reality is that Christianity, not in the context of eternity, makes absolutely no sense. Like it really doesn't make any sense. If there is no eternity, if there's nothing after now, what are we doing? If all there is this earth, then you really should just have as much fun as you can possibly have right now and then cash out. You know, like, why be loyal to your wife? Why not be greedy? You know, there's so many things. It's like, what are you doing? You know, if it's only this earth, it's only right now, then just go for it, man. Do what you want. You know, but if there is something beyond, well, that's a different way of thinking, isn't it? Because in that case, this earth is like nothing. It's you know, as compared to eternity, to the tens and thousands and hundreds of years that you'll live after, it's literally nothing, insignificant. So what does it matter? And so that just becomes a very strong tension in your thought, you know. And I mean, Peter talks about how we're like a band of brothers passing through here. We're really foreigners here, you know. And I think at the end of the day, when Jesus says that, you know, the meek will inherit the earth, it could be that God works in your life and that he pays you back, you know, for your being humble. That he, like a good dad, saw you give up your cookie and wants to reward that. It could be that he does that on this earth, on this side, but it may be that's later also. And I think for us, you know, I think we have to really decide if we think that or not. Do you really believe there's something after now? And if there is, then God has eternity to balance scales and to fix things, you know, so maybe your short-term losses aren't really as big a deal as you think they are, you know? So, I mean, to me, strongly, I would say Christianity only works. The only reason it makes any sense to follow Jesus is if you believe, you know, in eternity where there's punishment and reward. So
yeah, I think there's a few things in that. One, if I can go through some of the thoughts I'm just thinking on this, it's the benefit of meekness, for example, may not be a tangible in this life, may not be a tangible outcome, but it does feel good to not use your power if you have power. Like it's kind of it reflects good leadership in a lot of ways. This is what people are calling like a servant leader, somebody who has power but decides not to use it in
to smash people and take what you want. Yeah.
And so to use your power to help others and to serve, which is essentially Jesus, and this is what God chose to do. So that alone makes you feel good. And it's
absolutely.
The principle of it is enough to where it's like, oh, well, actually, I don't actually really need what other people are kind of going after, because that actually just feels pretty good to know you already have been given, and then you can. And I think that's a lot of like Jesus' teaching is you already have so much, not physically, but you have it spiritually.
Yeah, right? Well, and what are you turning yourself into? In that fighting and pushing and shoving, like, is that really what you want to be, or you want to be that in all that struggle and strife and running over people? And there certainly is a reward. Yeah, as far as just who you are and the peace you have with yourself, and that you don't have to. But it's
still in direct opposition to what we perceive as rewards. That culture.
Yeah, but also in what Jesus said. He said, "Inherit the earth."
Right.
So he there is a promise attached to meekness, gentleness, kindness, humility, that cluster of sort of behavioral traits. His promise is inherit the earth, and while there are these, those things are gifts in and of themselves to you and to your family and to your peace of mind and your, because if you're just always fighting and chaotic, then your home life is going to be a wreck, and it's a mess. And so I agree with that. But I think Jesus promises that even regarding the stuff, maybe that there will be balancing of the scales, but it may not happen now, and just to reemphasize that sort of eternal perspective idea. If you skip down to verse 10, which is the last beatitude, it says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs." Okay, so the meek get the earth, the persecuted get the kingdom of heaven. He said, then he goes on to elaborate on that. He says, "You are blessed." Blessed means happy. Remember, when they insult you, persecute you, and falsely say every kind of evil against you because of me, be glad and rejoice. Your reward is great in heaven. So see, there clearly that's eternal. For that is how they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So the word picture Jesus is painting there is, you're being persecuted, you're being beaten, you're being insulted, you're being abused, and yet somehow you're like, because it says you're blessed. And again, that a very easy, direct way to translate that word is also just say happy. So it's almost like, yes, I'm being abused. You're tied up to the stake and you're getting whipped, and with every lash, you're like, "Oh yeah, bring it on. Give me another one." And why are you happy? You're happy because the reward in heaven is so much greater than the persecution. You're like, well, I'm actually scoring way more than I'm suffering here, so I'm happy about it. But clearly, verses 10, 11, and 12 here only make sense, in the context of there being a heaven. And I do think that we have to think about that. And this last year, this COVID year, as a lot of us have lost people, we just had a big loss in my family. One of my cousins lost her husband. I came here in America just a few months ago because my grandfather passed. He was obviously much older. In the meantime, I've seen, cancer hit my family and all, and people pass, all the time. I'm 47. And my body doesn't act the same way it used to act. It doesn't do things it used to do, and it does things it used to not do. And, there's all sorts of, things that aren't great, that go with that, things that hurt and ache and pop and, and what, if you're honest with yourself, is that your turn is coming, so you go visit that relative, ask not who the bell tolls, it tolls for you. That's what, the poet said, meaning, yeah, you're going to die too. It's not just you, or it's not just that person, it's you. And, the reality is every day you're closer to, instead of being the person who's visiting the person who's passing, you're closer to being the person who's being visited as you pass. And that is just simply true. It can't be avoided. And if that's the case, then what is your source of hope, and how do you act in the face of all that? And what Jesus outlines here is a way to act and behave on this earth that is full of faith and hope and trust in a God who will take care of you here and then richly reward you on the other side. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what's being outlined. And I think as Christians, we have to be careful not to become so comfortable and happy. I mean, this year I'm living in Fairhope, Alabama, on the Bay Shore, when it's beautiful and the food's great and the people are nice. And you live here in East Cobb County, Atlanta.
That's half a county.
It's half a county.
Yeah. Half county pride. That's
East Cobb, half county.
Well, or East Cobb.
So it's Cobb County.
West Cobb, East Cobb.
But you live big. But you live in the east part, right?
Yeah, East Cobb.
And that's nice, right? And the West Cobb is just like garbage.
No,
how does that work?
West Cobbians, it is not garbage. So our office is in, almost West Cobb.
Central Cobb.
Yeah.
But it's a nice area, right?
Yeah.
And it's the kind of place where you can go get anything the earth offers. Like
pretty much.
You
can see a Braves game, and you can also go to a concert, and you can get home by 10:30 so that your babysitter can leave. Yeah,
and you can get anything from Asian food to Cuban food to whatever, and anything anything you want is at your fingertips, and it's good, and it can become a life.
Very spoiled.
Yeah, and pleasant.
Yeah.
And you can get to a place where you're like, I don't really know that I need Jesus to come back. I could just kind of sit here for a while.
Right.
I remember there was
East Cobb's not that good.
It's not that good. you're not ready to bypass heaven yet. So,
but yeah, I get your point.
Well, I remember years ago. So, if you live in the Christian world, periodically, people come along and say Jesus is coming back next weekend.
Right.
When you have a book printed or, something that runs around. And people
or like there's some numerical thing with the dates.
Yes. Like that. We solved it. Nobody solved it till now, but I solved it. And, here's what it is. And I remember I guess I was 14 years old. And there was a book that circulated that was 88 Reasons Jesus Will Return in 1988.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I remember it very clearly. It was like a little booklet. It was white with red letters on the cover.
88 Reasons.
Yeah, well, the reasons were short, but and yeah,
they were all parent reasons, like because I said so.
Yeah, it wasn't that long. It was a booklet, but I remember it circulating around certain kinds of churches and people and people like reading it and being like, well, maybe he's right. I don't know. And there was discussion about it or whatever. But I bring it up because of this. I remember my little brother, who if I was 14, he would have been 11 and about to turn 12. And the guy predicted that Jesus was going to come back on September 1st, 2nd, or 3rd of 1988.
Okay.
my brother's birthday was September 2nd. And I remember him saying, well, if Jesus comes back, he needs to wait till the 3rd. Because
I'm getting a Nintendo.
Yeah, because like I want to have my birthday. And then after my birthday, if he wants to come back, then maybe he can. Okay, and that's a kid, that's humorous. But we can get there.
Yeah.
We're like our earthly goal stuff is more important.
Let me have some kids. Let me have a wedding.
Absolutely. And I remember people at college saying that, Christians saying like, yeah, I want the Lord to come back, but maybe after I get married.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that's a big deal to you. But yeah, we can get really focused on here, really comfortable. And what we need to realize is we are never supposed to. We're supposed to view ourselves as passing through here, in the world, not of the world, is what the Bible says. And I think as much as, COVID has been a shock to the system, and I think maybe it's pulled us back to that, at least made people aware of their fragility, and that this life is fleeting and it is temporary, and that if you want any real hope, then there needs to be a God and something beyond this. Otherwise, what are we doing? And I think it's just important, as sort of laying the foundation for what goes on in the really the whole Bible. The whole Bible is like, if you don't like heaven or hell, then you need to stop reading your Bible, because Jesus talks about it constantly. The apostles talk about it constantly. It's just the New Testament is laced with that language. And so it's there. Thank God I don't have to decide who goes where. That's not on me, it's on him. But I do think, we should think about more than now, if that makes any sense.
No, I agree. I mean, it's great. I mean, there's definitely a benefit to avoiding sin in this life, because it makes your life worse, But as far as eternal consequence, I mean, and having an eternal perspective, I mean, I think that's super clear.
Well, I don't see any other way you land on rejoicing when you're persecuted.
Right.
How do you there's no reason to rejoice when you're persecuted on this side or that, I mean, I could see being like feeling fulfilled while you're persecuted because you stood up for a right thing.
Yeah.
But rejoicing when you're persecuted, like, woo, they're beating me, they're making fun of me. It's like, no, it's said clearly, for your reward is great in heaven. The reason you can rejoice through persecution is, and we think persecution is like, we have these pictures of like the Christians being thrown to the lions and the Colosseum or something, but that could be something small. I just kind of being made fun of at work because you won't do what everybody else does. Or it could be, I remember in a job I had years ago being asked to lie. It was a small thing. If the boss asked, tell them I went, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I say I won't do that, then these people are going to hate my guts and talk bad about me, but I don't want to be a liar.
Yeah.
And so then you say, I can't do that for you. And, there is a persecution that comes with that. And he says, in those moments that you can rejoice because God sees it and your reward's going to be bigger than what you paid.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we do have to keep that in perspective.
Cool. Awesome. So that's part 2 of this Sermon on the Mount section. What do we got for our part 3?
Violence.
Ooh,
we're going to talk violence.
That sounds exciting.
When you get to kill people, punch them, we're going to talk about exactly what Jesus says about when we can, throw down.
All right. That sounds good. That's a big teaser for next
We're going to have a big
time.
reenactment or something. We're just going to
awesome.
Strike you on the left cheek or whatever he says, the right cheek.
There you go. So as always, if you like this and want more of things like this, check us out on thelandandthebible.com for more content.
Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, click like and subscribe. It really helps us. And if you really enjoyed it, go on over to our website, thelandinthebible.com, and become a supporter. It helps us generate more content and gives you access to our full library of video and Bible study content.